Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Vaughn Colber. I'm chair of this committee, and I'm saying that for the benefit of the fact that we have 3 new members joining our committee today. So I think before we even get into our agenda, first thing I'd like to do is to, for the benefit of our new members, all the other committee members just give a brief introduction of themselves. And then we can maybe have a few words from each of our new members. Just you can introduce yourself and just let us know why you're interested in being on the committee. And then we can all just kind of get to know each other a little bit better. So let's just do, I think, just do our committee first. So again, I'm the chair, and Kirsten, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Vaughn. Yeah, I'm vice chair of the committee, and I've been a member of the committee. I want to say now it's maybe, Vaughn, you and I started at the same time. Was it maybe 4 years ago? I'm thinking it was around,
actually.
Yeah, I think it was around 4 years ago. So I work in telecommunications, and I've been a member for, about 4 years. And I've really enjoyed being a member of this committee. We have so many touch points with other businesses and other initiatives. So welcome to the new members, and looking forward to working with you.
Thanks, Kirsten. And I'm just going to say big apologies to the new members. We were hoping to do a bit of a committee orientation, prior to this meeting, but time just kind of got away from us. So apologies for that. Alex, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Alex. I am the council representative for this committee.
Okay, thanks, Alex. And Sat?
Sure, Vaughn. Nice to meet everyone. And again, as Kirsten said, thanks for joining the committee and welcome. I've been a part of this committee for a little over a year now. I've been a resident for about 10 years. I work as an engineering consultant, but primarily from home, which is wonderful. And also my wife and I co-own Nectar Yoga on the islands.
Great, thanks, Sat. How about Jody?
Hello, my name's I'm with I'm here representing Tourism Bowen. I'm not sure if my sound is working that well. Connection seems to be very staticky or in and out. I don't know if people are having that issue.
I'm getting a little bit of that, yeah. Okay, Leben?
Yeah, I've got a real.
Hi, I'm Leben, Bowener for 5 years now. I joined this committee about 2.5 years ago, and was a little absent last year due to a lot of busyness. My passion for this committee is my background in economics and regional development, and how we navigate these processes and bring people together. So it's always getting a lot of attention from my end, and it's always intriguing to see how that works. And we have beautiful stories on the island again the last few months. So so trying to contribute from my end here too. So that's mine.
Thanks, Leben. And Martin?
Hi, everyone. I'm Martin. It's really nice to see the big group. I have been a member for just over a year, shortly after we moved to Bowen. And I work in AI and fintech recently, and I'm really interested in community economics.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, so I think we can move on to our new members. Cooper, would you like to give a brief intro?
Sure. I'm Cooper McGuire. I've been on Bowen for almost 2 years, so recent transplant, I guess. But I've been coming here since birth, so the island's familiar to me otherwise. And I'm I guess, management consultant by day. Yeah, just very interested in sort of how all the pieces fit together and how they can maybe fit together better. So that was my motivation for joining.
Thanks, Cooper. We have Roger.
Hi there, my name's Roger Lyons. I've been here on Bowen Island full-time for about 3 years, and a couple of years before that part-time as well. I work in technology. I do consulting into recently software technology. And in fact, my last gig was into the Land Title Survey Authority, in which I started to get more exposure in some of the products to different municipalities within BC, and found it quite interesting. So I thought I would dig deeper and join up and hopefully add some value into Bowen Island.
Thank you, Roger. And then we have Brian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Haley. My wife and I have been coming to Bowen Island for the last 37 years. My in-laws retired to Bowen probably 38 years ago. I have been involved in land use planning and development for the last 40 plus years, the last 30 years of which was with the City of Toronto. And I retired from the City of Toronto in December of last year, having been the Director of Planning and Development Law. So I was the legal advisor to various committees and council with respect to land use development in the City of Toronto. And certainly since retirement, I felt that I needed to do something on Bowen. We've always loved Bowen, and I was very grateful to be appointed to the Economic Development Committee by council, and I certainly look forward to the future work of the committee.
Thank you, Brian.
Did you get the mayor?
Haven't done the mayor yet. Sorry.
Last but not least.
That is totally
Not
okay.
least.
It's nice to fade into the background sometimes. So hello everyone, I'm Andrew Leonard. I'm the mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and a council representative here to the Community Economic Development Committee. I absolutely love watching our committee meetings lately and seeing new members pop up and hearing some enthusiasm and energy and excitement. I think it's just great to see, because our committees are really the fertile ground that I hope we can have some innovative policy making come out of in the next 4 years, the next term. I was interested in the Community Economic Development Committee right from the start. I think economic development, particularly on Bowen Island, and particularly is the way that we have plugged it into things, and some of the conversations that I've been having crosses so many threads and tugs on so many different initiatives and so many interesting intersections that I think we can have in conversation here and see how we can build that into policy and build that into initiatives. And I'm excited to work with our chair here, Vaughn, as well as everybody here on the committee. So thrilled to be here.
And we are thrilled too, just to be clear. Okay, so here we go. Let's get moving on our agenda. Steph, we don't have any late items, do we?
Just a supplemental of the policy to support the rezoning application, but no new discussion items.
Okay, so Daniel Martin couldn't join us. After all, was going to do a brief presentation, and so we have him by video.
And first time at that, we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Meaning video of a previous presentation he had given that would be essentially the same as what he was going to do for us tonight. So, yeah. Okay, so we just need to approve the agenda. Recommendation that the Community Economic Development Committee approve the agenda for this March 29th, 2023 meeting. All in favor? You can just put your hands up. I can see everybody. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, so that's carried. And then the minutes of our last meeting of February 15th. The recommendation is that the minutes of the Community Economic Development Committee meeting held March 29th, 2023 be adopted. Do we have any commentary on the minutes? Jody?
Can I make one small request?
Yeah.
The word stringent, it is, I think that was my comment here. So in Daniel's, the last point under the minutes of Daniel's, it says other members supported regulations in order to ensure. If we could just get rid of stringent.
Okay,
Is that okay?
sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's not the first
Thank
time
you.
I've been told my language is too strong for minutes.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move to adopt the minutes then.
As amended. Mhm.
I need a seconder then, right? Can I have a seconder? Thanks, Jody. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, adopted. And I'm just going to mention that we're going to move on to public comments, but I don't believe we're having any type of commentary there at all this evening. So the next item is the referral from council regarding the Cape. And I want to mention that we also have in the room Jeffrey Fitzpatrick. Jeffrey, can you just give a brief introduction just so sorry, I haven't acknowledged your presence here yet.
Not at all. Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation to be here, Chair Colbert. My name is Jeff Fitzpatrick. I'm the Division Manager of Regional Park Design and Development. And I'm just here as Metro Vancouver rep for the discussion on the council referral on the proposed park at Cape Roger Curtis, the rezoning application. I'm happy to answer any questions and be of any support I can. And of course, I'll take my cues from you, Chair, but very happy to answer any questions I can tonight. Thank you for having me. What a great group you have. It's really cool to hear everyone's background as well. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Steph, you're going to run the...
Okay, so let's try this. With a little last minute, so I hope this works. Confidence is everything. What are you seeing?
Your email.
No. Okay.
It's okay. It's just me not knowing where the Zoom link was for the meeting. Nothing secret.
Oh no, I'm exposing.
I'm just going to reiterate that the discussion that we have will culminate this evening in making a recommendation to council. So this is a referral from council. They're asking for committee recommendations, and we will produce a recommendation by the end of our discussion.
What are you seeing now?
Sorry?
What are you seeing now?
Oh, we're seeing your Zoom screen.
Okay.
Actually, YouTube page.
Pardon?
Yeah, the YouTube page.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And then I would love to have, a good discussion with.
Can you hear it?
On this application, and Linda or Lydia, sorry, is
Yeah.
here as well to help us with that. Okay. So as the committee is no doubt aware, the municipality has received an application from Metro Vancouver for a proposed regional park at Cape Roger Curtis with an application to amend our land use bylaw and our official community plan over these 24 lots at Cape Roger Curtis, shown here in the dark green. So the proposal is to rezone the property to a park zone, so passive park with a zone variation over a portion of the site to permit supervised overnight use of up to 100 campsites. The proposal includes the following types of camping, following range of campsites, so a mix of walk, bike, and tent camping, group tent camping, car accessible tent camping, and tent cabins. And you can see on the side of the screen here, the current proposed site plan showing where those different forms of overnight use would take place. So in terms of our existing bylaws, the OCP designates the entirety of the Cape Project Curtis area as our rural. And I'll go through, I have some slides just talking about some of those policies that apply to the rural designation and other things as well. And the zoning, it's zoned rural residential 1 or RR1. Again, the whole of Cape Project Curtis has that zoning. The rural residential zone allows a number of uses. It allows 1 dwelling per lot and 1 accessory dwelling or detached secondary suite per lot. So the 24 lots would or are permitted to have up to 48 total dwellings. We permit other things like residential guest accommodation. So it's a short-term rental use. We permit bed and breakfast use as a home occupation. Just for some context in terms of current overnight uses that are permitted in our zones. And then the land use bylaw has a section that's called uses permitted in all zones. So we permit in all zones bicycle paths, equestrian trails, pedestrian trails, or boardwalks, educational, interpretive signage, open space, and natural parks. So in my report to council, I say that this would mean that Metro Vancouver could operate a regional park similar to like the northern portion of Crippen Park around Clarny Lake without requiring a rezoning or OCP amendment. And in fact, some of the municipalities' parks operate under this clause, so they may be zoned residential, but we operate them as parks because they consist of natural parks or trails or open space. And so does the Bowen Island Conservancy, which owns 3 lots at Cape Project Curtis and operates a nature reserve there, are able to do that without a rezoning, but under the rural residential 1 zone and that section of uses permitted in all zones. So in terms of OCP designation, so these are some objectives that relate to that rural designation. So for new members, our OCP is our official community plan, our guiding document. It's what council refers to when considering changes to the land use bylaw, is to look at our guiding document, the official community plan, and the different there's different sections of the OCP, and so the different land uses tend to have then objectives and policies that relate specific to that designation, and then other potential uses will have their own objectives and policies. But so in this case, this rural designation has these 4 objectives here. So objective 59, to provide lots of a size that help maintain and enhance the rural resource values of the island. Objective 60, to preserve and protect the land that contains environmentally sensitive plant communities, terrestrial herbaceous ecosystems, wetland riparian ecosystems, coastal ecosystems, or forest ecosystems that may be significant. I'm not necessarily going to read all of these, but just giving you a sense of what they are. Objective 61 is to protect the maintenance of tree cover, watersheds, wildlife habitat, viewscapes, and rural atmosphere. And objective 62 to protect watershed areas from incompatible land uses. Relevant to this application, our OCP has 2 specific policies related to campgrounds. So policy 189, campgrounds for recreational vehicles and trailer parks shall not be permitted within the municipality. So in the sense for this proposal, we would say that this meets policy 189. They're not proposing, or they're explicitly proposing campsites that don't involve recreational vehicles. And then policy 190, campgrounds serving the needs of backpackers and bicyclists may be permitted through commercial zoning regulation or temporary use permit on larger rural designated properties, which are or will be potentially be accessible by island trails. Campgrounds should be subject to regulations that relate to design and servicing requirements in order to minimize impacts on the environment, and should have on-site supervision. And then the OCP has some sections that relate specifically to Cape Project Curtis. So objective 40 says to encourage the retention of the portions of Cape Project Curtis in a natural state accessible to the public, including ecologically sensitive coastal bluffs and other sensitive ecosystems, such as Arbutus and Douglas fir woodland, portions of the shoreline, archaeological features, viewpoints, and significant marine objectives, and significant marine shorelines. And then objective 68, to continue to promote the public interest in the development of the Cape Project Curtis lands. And then policy 152 is longer and relates to, says notwithstanding that Cape Project Curtis has an approved subdivision plan. So that's the current lots where there's 59 10-acre lots. The municipality continues to promote the public interest of Cape Roger Curtis by encouraging the development of the site to conserve the majority of the coastline for ecosystem protection, especially the south-facing ecologically sensitive and unique coastal bluff. Where there are no adverse ecological impacts, develop public waterfront walking trails along the majority of the coastline connecting to the Cross Island Greenway, protect environmentally sensitive areas and rare species, cluster homes and other structures in any new development to reduce land disturbance, maximize greening space and the opportunity for trails, and facilitate transportation alternatives, and minimize and mitigate any negative impacts from Cape Roger Curtis development on the adjacent neighborhood and on the island community as a whole. So these are sort of good guiding policy and objective for Cape Roger Curtis. And as I read through them, you kind of think about how they relate to this proposal before us. And then in terms of where we are in this rezoning process. So this application was introduced to council, and this is a little small and hard to read, but so I'll try to give you the high points. This application was introduced to council at the February 27th meeting. So we had a committee of the whole on the afternoon of the 27th. And then again, it was discussed at the council meeting that evening. And at that meeting, council referred the application to advisory committees, to the Islands Trust, to First Nations and BC Ferries and Vancouver Coastal Health, among others. And that's where we are in this process. Council also referred it to a public information meeting, and you may have participated in Metro Vancouver holding open houses and virtual open houses last week. And they've also have an online feedback form that you can participate in. And so as we move forward, council referred us to bring the results of those referrals back to a committee of the whole. So that would be the next sort of council check-in. Council would then have to have a regular council meeting where they consider first reading of a bylaw. And then following first reading, we would again seek referrals. So we're required to refer to the Islands Trust, and we would seek referrals again to committees and further public engagement before council would have a consider second reading of a bylaw. So this timeline is showing like the necessary points for a timeline. And sometimes when I sort of read it out, people think that then it's set in stone. And I often say, well, no, council has the ability, to interject additional steps in the process, but this is trying to show what has to happen. So after second reading, we are required to have a public hearing. That's the formal council meeting where they have the bylaw. Everyone can come and speak directly to council on the proposed bylaw. Following a public hearing, council would consider third reading, and then we're required to refer an OCP amendment to the Islands Trust for approval, and then council again would consider fourth reading and adoption of the bylaw. And then this was that council recommendation from the February 27th meeting. So the referral to committees, the referral to agencies like the Islands Trust, Coastal Health, Bowen Island Conservancy, BC Ferries, Squamish First Nations. Council required the applicant to hold a public information meeting, and council directed staff to report back on results of this referral to a committee of the whole. And then this is just the recommendations in your agenda. So I'll stop sharing at this point to open it up for discussion.
Okay, and before I do that, Daniel, that's a
Well, good presentation.
I think it.
Did it work?
Yeah, it worked.
I've never done that before. That was exciting. It's a big day for this group, at least for me. Thank you for your patience with that. Okay, sorry, Vaughn. Back to you.
Okay, so earlier, Steph distributed the policy considering applications in terms of economic development for the municipality. So I think this might be a good way to have our conversation. If we look at the 7 points, I don't know if you all have them there. But if we sort of looked at this proposal through the lens of these 7 points, perhaps that can guide our discussion. So I think what I'll do is I'll go through the different points and then ask for commentary as much as you would like to do. So let's look at number 1. That the application clearly indicates the nature and purpose of the application. Clearly indicates the nature and purpose. I think it's very clear what the nature and purpose of the application is. Does anybody have anything more to say about that? I think Daniel also explained the zoning is related to the fact that there's campsites. Otherwise, the park would be automatically allowed. Oh, good. So Steph has put in the chat the 7 points. Thanks, Steph. Okay. Number 2, positively impacts local employment. So it's not that I don't think any application has to achieve all of these things, but I think we can consider how, because it's an economic development lens, how it might impact these areas. So impacting local employment. Do we see any local employment impacts?
Is there anything formal on that? Like I saw that it's foregoing $185,000 in presumed property taxes. Is there anything on the flip side looking at what the positive economic development of a park could be?
So I know that the finance committee did a bit of a study on the impact of sort of the property taxes that would no longer be collected over time, right? And but I don't have the detail on that, and I guess for me, I would also think, yeah, like what are the lost revenues, and what other costs to the municipality will there be if this proposal went ahead as stated? So in other words, what infrastructure costs to the municipalities on the cost side, right?
Yeah, the only number I've seen, and I just read this briefly, is the 185,000 for foregone property taxes, but I think seems like there should be a lot of other numbers that we have an opportunity to look at before making some kind of decision.
Yeah, Kirsten, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm curious to know if we've heard from Metro Van in terms of managing the park, looking after the park. Are there any employment numbers that they've shared with us?
Excuse me, sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff. Yep.
Through the chair, shall I speak to that a little bit?
Please, okay? Yep.
Okay, I don't want to be presumptuous, so I will take my cues from the committee, but I can speak to that a little bit. In terms of how we manage the park and how we staff our park, our parks are managed by a team of staff that is both full-time and auxiliary. So what we have is dedicated operational staff who are uniformed and on site at all times, and their role is to maintain the park, enforce bylaws, keep people safe, and protect the resource. So for a park of this nature, we would have some full-time staff, and we would augment that in the summer season with seasonal staff. It's often student employment or seasonal employment, not necessarily student, but often for students. So we would have a dedicated staff contingent, and I hope that answers that question. I can speak to some of the typical economic benefits that we see from parks if it's of interest to the committee, but again, I'll certainly take my cues from the committee chair. Would that be helpful?
Yes,
sorry, I got a little distracted there at the end. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification through the chair are there numbers that you can give us? Can you share with us in terms of local employment on Bowen Island associated with the park? In addition to, are there any other, in your experience, spin-off employment opportunities due to the operation of a park, of the camp specifically? I shouldn't say it's specifically the campground. Like, if are there any numbers that you could maybe share with us, specific numbers or spin-off effects in terms of additional employment associated with the campground that you could share? Just
Yeah, of course. I can speak to the direct and indirect employment pieces. So in terms of what the full-time and part-time staff contingent would be, as once we develop the full plan, we'll know, because the staffing relates to exactly what's in the park. But what we do know is there would be several full-time positions, and there would be several part-time positions seasonally based on what's in the park. If you look to Crippen Regional Park, for example, that's staffed with, and our operations staff is typically on island just because of the commute. So it's usually folks who live on the island who work in our parks. Kevin Hutchison, I think many folks on the island know Kevin. He was with us forever. He just retired. So there's the direct impact of the park employment. Another piece where we see employment benefits from parks is through contract work. And that really ranges everything from professional consulting through to maintenance work. So historians, biologists, engineers, project managers, architects, we hire them to do work related to the park. And of course, we hire folks to do maintenance contracts in our park, hazard trees, you name it, we hire folks to do it. An average park has an operating budget of several $100,000 and annually, so that would be invested in the community as well. For the camping aspect of the project, I know it's a part of the project that gets a lot of attention, but it's one sort of relatively small part of a big park and a big body of work. So related to the camping, there would be overnight host who would offer local employment as well. And then there's the spin-off employment of people requiring servicing, related to accessing nature as well. Anyway, that's just a few comments. Hopefully that's helpful, Kirsten.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jody, you had your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, my thank you, Jeffrey, for that, because I was wondering if there could be, for instance, a hire first, a Bowen Island policy. As you noted, it's great to have the staff here so that they're not commuting and, the precious space on the ferry, that kind of thing. And somebody raised this point with me the other day, like I'm with Tourism Bowen Island, we manage the visitor center.
Yeah.
And they were saying, of course, if the park goes ahead, there'll be more visitors, there'll be more need for destination management. And would Metro Vancouver be contributing to that increase in demand? Like financially supporting that?
Yeah, I guess a couple of thoughts on that. One important, well, in terms of like a hire only local piece, it is a bit challenging because it's a unionized environment and we're government, so we have to have fair competition for employment. But I can say, in my experience with Metro Vancouver, which is 14 years now, our staff who work, they usually come from Bowen just because of the access to the work and the ferry. So we typically end up hiring folks who are local there. In terms of the need for orientation and those kind of related pieces, we do operate Crippen Regional Park obviously in which kind of hugs the cove in many places. And I think as part of this project, we recognize the need to provide support in the cove for access to the proposed park. So whether that be new facilities, new staging, new access, new orientation, then I think there's a recognition that there's some work we need to do there. We're currently investing, I think it's $1.6 million to upgrade Davies Orchard. And there's a number of sites that may require upgrade to receive people to support their access to the park. We do support the community in a number of ways already in Snug Cove by providing access without charge to the heritage cottages and other places. So ways that we can support that work, I think we'd look to continue to do that and probably expand those efforts as well. Hopefully that answers your question, Jody.
So, did Sat?
Oh,
want to
sorry,
speak?
I was muted there. Sorry, I saw Brian's hand up earlier, but I don't see it anymore. Did you want to ask a question?
Thanks, Juan. I think Jeffrey answered my question, and I had the same concerns that Jody had with respect to a local hiring protocol. And I think Jeffrey has answered that question.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Sat, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Juan. Is Metro Vancouver able to provide or give an indication of sort of the off season, if you will, camping numbers that you're projecting or anticipating?
Certainly. Off season, that's a kind of an easy one because the proposal is to operate the camping facility from May through to October. So it would be closed over the off season. So there wouldn't be any access during that time. Of course, the park would still be staffed, maintained, and accessible for day use during the winter. But there's just not that sort of demand for the overnight access over the winter.
Is there any data to support that, or is that just thoughts of Metro Vancouver?
The data would be from our existing camping facilities. We have not seen. There isn't the demand, but I mean it is something we're always monitoring. We've found in our parks that the shoulder season is growing with climate change, actually. So if there was a change in behavior, we could look at changing that. But as it stands, we just don't see the demand at our other sites.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, I actually had a question as well, because I've seen in Metro Van's presentations before that there's a lot of talk about a shuttle to take people from the Cove to the site. And I guess that was one of my questions is first of all, is that something that Metro Van is going to be trying to do, or is it sort of incumbent on the municipality to try and work with TransLink to make that happen? Or could it possibly be a private enterprise? Because we've had a few people on the island who had experience with on island transportation and might be interested in doing that. That could be an economic activity for the island.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And that is absolutely one of those sort of spin-off economic benefit pieces that I was speaking about before, but I didn't mention that, and it's an important one. The proposed park shuttle is something that Metro Vancouver would fund as a service for access to the park. Public transit is important, and we are going to be working with TransLink to expand service, but the nature of the proposed park shuttle it's different. It's something that Metro Vancouver is proposing as a way to access the park, so a dedicated service. We have another park in Widgeon Marsh Regional Park in the Tri-Cities area, and we've been working with the municipality through a rezoning process there. I only raised it because we've worked on the proposal to run an electric shuttle to that park as well. So this it's I guess a trend in some ways of getting people to parks in sustainable, low impact ways that is important. So yeah, certainly that would be a contracting opportunity for the community and an important part of the project. I made some comments earlier about the Snug Cove piece, and when we think about that shuttle, it's like it's really the whole system thinking of how we receive people to the park in a way that is complementary and low impact to the community and environment. So hopefully that answers your question, Chair Colbert.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I sort of thought if that's the case, then there might be other opportunities also to enhance the movement around the island. Like if there is such a shuttle, perhaps it could go to Killarney Lake. Often the parking is oversubscribed there for people who want to just hike around the lake. And so maybe it could alleviate some of the existing sort of traffic that we have.
Yes, no, that's an interesting comment, and we've heard that as well, that the existing Metro Vancouver Park is on the way to the new park. So perhaps there is it's a park shuttle, not exclusive to the new park. We have heard that suggestion from a few folks, and we're looking at that as well.
Just one more thing. So I could also see an economic opportunity for our electric bike company to expand their service, since many of the sites have been designated as either walk or bike in, but obviously you cannot walk from the cove there with your gear. And in fact, you can't even, most people would not be able to use a regular bicycle because it's too hilly. They'll never make it, right?
Yeah.
So even though they're designated as such, it's kind of like, I don't really know what that means because nobody's walking or bicycling there, right?
Great question. Yeah, so you're quite right that over half of the sites are proposed to be bike, hike, or shuttle in. So no cars. Shuttle, that's reasonable. But the bike and hike piece, there's a connection that's important, and that is something we need to work with the municipality on securing and ultimately building a good, safe connection to the park. That's a priority. Now, in terms of the e-bike part of that, yeah, absolutely. I think folks coming with an e-bike will make good use of it, but also in terms of rental and access, that's on our radar as well. That would be an important connection.
So you say you have to work on that access, but honestly, to create a trail that goes all the way, is millions and millions of dollars. I mean, I don't know. Anyways, I see a lot of hands coming up, so I'm going to stop now. And I think Jody, you were next.
Yeah, I think I've got just two questions. Jeffrey, you mentioned, you said that the camping is May to September and that there's not a demand in the off season. Correct me if I'm wrong, is part of the camping experience, are you not proposing to do some like yurt or something like that could be 4-season camping?
Yes, no, that is a good question. And it's May to October to Halloween.
Sorry, yeah.
So when I say that it would be closed over the winter season, that as it's currently proposed, we're only proposing to run it from May through to October. But we have heard that point a number of times that, hey, there might be interest in access to these yurt ideas over the winter, and we'll certainly consider that. They're a small number of the overall proposal, 5 to 10. So and an important part of the camping piece is that there's full oversight. So we have heard that we'll kind of reflect on it through their operating model, but it's a good question. Otherwise, I mean, I think we don't have yurts at our other sites. We do have cabins like at Capilano and in other parts, and they are run year round. So yeah, we'll take that away and consider that. Thank you.
Yeah, just based on what I'm seeing, I mean, Tourism Bowen Island, I mean, our whole thing has been to build up the off season and the shoulder season.
Yeah.
And there because we're close to Vancouver, there is the demand for that, and we encourage people come, like storm watching to Fino, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And given the traditional camping that is currently proposed, I'm just wondering, due to the overload on the ferry and stuff like that, maybe it could be a bit of a revisioning so that it does offer that different experience.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Thank you for that.
There could be some benefits about that. The second quick question, just to be really, is when charging for the camping and all that kind of stuff, are there going to be any fees coming back to Bowen Island in any way? Like, just wondering. We talked about the tax and things like that.
Yeah, so no, that's a fair question. The fees for camping would not, they would flow to Metro Vancouver, but I do want to clarify that they are absolutely not a revenue positive operation, because the access we're trying to provide and the cost that we provided at is quite low. It's quite reasonable. It's made to be accessible, and because we manage to a really high standard of oversight, staffing, maintenance, and bylaw enforcement, and so on, the revenue simply, it does not offset the cost by any means. So it does offset it a little bit, but it's not a big revenue generator for us. That's the truth. It's more of a service than a sort of money-making endeavor.
Okay, thanks. Cooper?
So I saw in the original thing that Daniel put together, there was, I don't know if it's done, Bunt and Associates study of traffic that the park would generate. Do we have figures for that at this point, or is that still coming?
The final report is will be provided over the next week, so it's in progress. But you're quite right that Bunt is a traffic consultant, is looking at a fulsome traffic study for the park. And what they've been tasked to do, working with Bowen Island Municipality, is look at, okay, the property is currently zoned RR1. These are the things that can happen on the site. That development would generate this kind of traffic. Metro Vancouver is proposing a park. They're proposing a shuttle. They're proposing some overnight use that will generate this level of traffic. And it's a comparison of those two, and also looking at all the strategies to get there. So it's in progress, and it will be in hand.
That seems like the key input to a lot of other projections, and also probably the key input to one of the lightning rod topics on the island. So it seems hard to have an intelligent discussion about this without a baseline projection of volumes. I don't know.
It's no, I totally agree. It's a critical piece of information, and as part of that work, we've also been looking at detailed projections of park visitation. So,
so Bunt and Associates is literally only doing vehicle traffic. They're not taking into account people that might be using a shuttle or other public transport or anything like that.
No, they'll look at all access options, okay. But there is an input to that work that we have to provide in terms of how many people we project to be using the site for day use, and how many people we expect to be coming for the overnight use. And
is that in conjunction with BC Ferries at all? Like, are they getting volumes from BC Ferries to really understand how those things might mix together or not?
Absolutely, yes. No, the work on accessing the park doesn't stop at the Cove. We know there's an important piece on the other side in terms of getting to the ferry and the pressure on the ferry. So it certainly will take into consideration the impacts to the ferry as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Levin?
Thank you, Von. I first have a question on the process, is because we now make Jeff work terribly hard, and it's almost like a continuous Q&A, but is the goal of our session now, is that a Q&A so that we are all aligned on information, or do we need to bring amendments and proposals forward on how we support it? So that's a question. What is the goal of us meeting here now? And are we doing one by one also regarding the criteria, or what? So are we having an open conversation on what is our opinion and what do we want to propose forward also as a committee, or is this a Q&A with Jeffrey?
No. So we are having a discussion, and I'm using the criteria that we have on hand to sort of guide it, because it may not all be necessary. I think we're spending a lot of time on this one, which kind of blends into number 3, which is all about local economic linkages and opportunities and things like that, right? Okay. And because the goal ultimately, and Jeffrey's here as a resource, that because I'm sure if we had this conversation with zero, without the ability to actually ask questions, I just think it's very helpful that we can do that. But the goal is to provide as a committee, recommendation to council. Okay. So we can format that however we think is, it should be. But basically, we're having this conversation so we can think through some of these things and how we want to present our recommendations to council.
Okay, that helps me a lot, because I think what happens now in the last 20 minutes is for me a big key of what is also a danger. And Jeffrey, so many thanks also for what you bring to the table. And I can see how much passion you have to make this succeed also. So I also at the same time, how can we make use? For me, it's very important, the second criterion. This is a massive investment in the island. So it's almost like a no-brainer that we cannot refuse that present to the island. Hence, the third criterion is a very important one. Who owns what? And there's a very big danger now in us asking all of the questions, and you as an organization trying to be smarter and smarter and smarter and working harder and harder and harder for us, can only, if we don't take care, blow it up instead of helping it forward. And what I mean by that, who is owning the solutions for these things? I really believe if we want to create a local ignition also for our economics, it needs to be owned also by the island in very close collaboration with, for example, Metrovan. You become a landowner on an island for many, many generations, but who needs to operationalize that? If we always have to run over to the other side to ask support for Metrovan, that's not sustainable in the long run. So how can we start co-owning that? And for me also to have a good approval of the rezoning, we need to have the guarantees. And that's also what I heard in the questions from you also, Cooper, and other people, and who will own what in this whole thing. It's not a financial viable thing. I think the profit and loss on the campground, I don't want to have the profit and loss of that on the island. I think, please take it. But the investment, so it also tells so much on how you invest in the island and how you invest here, because this needs to leverage our infrastructure or community to another level. So this also needs to be built by the community. And how can we do that? So how can we use your support and your strengths to build our community and not the other way around? How will we support as a community that you build a good park? Because then you screw up and we're going to screw up. An island is not made for that. And a community is not made for that. And so what I'm looking for is, I think we have a big opportunity as a committee to use our C. So 3 years ago, when I first joined the meetings in the community, the C was added to the committee. So the Community Economic Committee. So how can this be a community economic development part? And I would like to see how we can arrange governance in a different way on who is taking the decisions on what in the long run. If we can bring that into the rezonal and the approval, that there's a governance body that is deciding on islands in joint conversations also together with Metrovan, we change the narrative, but we also change the fears of our owners and of all of the different voices. So how can we arrange that? How can we build that into all of these things? And that's a lot of talk now, and sorry for all my wordings, but I really think all of these criteria go hand in hand, but it needs to start with an operational management that is owned by the island, that is supported by the big parties around that, in very close collaboration with each other, and not the other way around. That you're going to define as Metrovan how all the operations will run, and we constantly going to block when we are not agreeing on that, because that's going to be a very tiring process. So that's my first take to the committee, also to bring us to a kind of approval and an opinion.
I don't know of such a model, do you, Levin? Where, and I'm going to ask Jeffrey to comment on that, but what would that model be? What would be this governance body? I agree that I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that our role as a committee is to support and make this thing happen. I mean, that's not our, I think what we do is we put it through our lens and we bring up any issues or items of support, or reasons why we think it should be supported or not. But I guess I'm coming back to what I'm trying to glean from what you said, which is I get it. If Metrovan is fully the operators, where does that leave the island? And the goal is that, yes, I think everything that we do and everything that we embrace on this island should improve our community in some way. So I get that, but I'm trying to think, what would that look like? And do you have any ideas of that model? What would that government's body look like?
Are you, sorry, go ahead, didn't mean to interrupt.
For me, it's very easy, Vaughn. It's really like how to create a cooperative body where we have a board where most of the important committees on island, but also important foundations, there's the Conservancy, there's other ones, really manage this collectively and are responsible for the operations. But depending on a plan we co-created together with Metrovan, with BC Ferries, with the people that we are depending upon. But I think the how to create a board here on island that is representing the different communities or foundations or organizations that have to deal with these things, so that you can create consistently also on island a value that you really want to do. And then we are forced into bringing the economics of tourism together with the ecological points of view. So it's either a cooperative or a foundation, but it's a operational body that you create. It's an organization that you create, where Metrovan is a part of in the board, but where we also create a governance in different circles. And this exists. It exists in multiple parks also in Europe. So you have the National Parks Europe, also Europarks. That's the model they've been using for the last 5 to 10 years when they start up new projects. So it exists.
Okay, but we are talking about a several $100,000 a year budget to operate. You're talking, operating budget, and you believe that would be shared by the municipality?
There is an operational budget also, Jeffrey, what you shared. There's an operational budget. So it's how to co-creating them. So it's not that we need to deliver to that budget and that we're going to manage it ourselves. We cannot do that. We need the high expertise of Metrovan needs to be used, but the island expertise needs to be used too. So nobody better knows how the ferry works than the people living on islands that take the ferry every day. So who's going to represent that? So how to integrate things like food or silence of neighborhood activities. There's very good people. That's the knowledge also. And that's what's 6.5, how to really bring these people very close to building the operations around that. But together with Metrovan, I'm not saying instead of Metrovan, together with Metrovan, but taking it in our hands. And I'm shooting it from, so it's also to bring us to a right conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Levin. Roger?
Yeah, combining sort of 2, 3, and 4 as we've been doing, the one area that I wanted to ask about was ancillary services in some of the other parks, like supplies, ice cream, important, those type of food supplies. It would grow up around such a park, especially when there's not a lot of cars that you just hop in when you decide your dried food was a really bad idea to go have dinner. And then how do we manage that? So there is some economic development probably associated with it. Don't really know how big that would be relative to this size of park. So Jeffrey, if you have any sort of insights as to maybe what other parks have happened, and it usually happens on the outskirts, right? Kind of.
Also,
Yeah.
maybe because Daniel's not here, Jeffrey, if you can speak to the commercial zoning in that area for the types of services Roger's suggesting.
Within the park,
usually on the boundary of the park is where you would see these type of services.
Yes. Yeah. No. You're quite right that often and I guess in more urban parks you would have the sort of service type in pieces directly next to the park. The zoning and land use adjacent to this park is either conservation or rural residential. So there's less opportunity for sort of commercial development right in and around the park. But there is certainly opportunity for business development related to the park in the cove as people access the park, improvements to the cove, and ultimately it's not our mandate to drive economic growth. Our mandate is to protect and connect, but inevitably, because parks do it, they do drive economic growth. So there will be people looking for rentals and all that kind of stuff as well. And then there's the less tangible or direct aspects of economic development that's associated with park in terms of benefit to quality of life, brand, and experience of place too. So those are just a few thoughts. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but hopefully it got at it a little bit.
Yeah, I assume you don't have like specific numbers, but it's just a case where there is some economic development. Where what Leaving was talking about is that instead of having a hard boundary between what's in the park and what's out of the park,
oh yes,
work together to start to manage what should be in, what should be out, what's the vision, not just at the boundaries as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just a few comments on that. But collaboration is kind of ingrained in our DNA. So if you bear with me, I'll just offer a few thoughts. In terms of our governance model, we report to the Metro Vancouver board because that's where we are funded. On the board, on the Regional Parks Committee, Mayor Leonard and a Bowen rep are part of that, as well they're on the board. Now, there's a number of processes that we have to work through the creation of the park. One is the rezoning process. Through that process, we negotiate with the municipality, we collaborate with the municipality on what does the park need outside the park and in the park. What does that look like? We also have a deeply collaborative planning process to determine what does this park need to be, what can it offer, what will it look like. So we're kind of not even midway through that piece. And then there's the ongoing management of a park. And that is something we work with the community on so many levels. Conservation, servicing, planning, operations, everything. Like if you look at Crippen Regional Park, for example, Davies Orchard, we work with the community on the planning, design, upgrade, and operation of that. It's a community facility. The Memorial Garden, the Causeway, the horse riding ring, and I could go on and on and on. These are things that were proposed by the community, were built by the community, that we work with the community on. So the park in and of itself is like a living being that we steward over time. And the best parks are deeply collaborative with the people who use them on a daily basis, which is local people. We know in Crippen, for example, there's about 300,000 visits a year, and about half of them are from Bowen residents. And so you can do the math based on the population of Bowen and how much folks enjoy that park. So anyway, just a few comments on that. Hopefully that's answers some of those questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Kirsten, see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Fawn. So just a clarifying question, going back to economic development, you do have the campground. Typically at campgrounds, there may be like a concession stand or a place to buy snacks, or maybe things that you're missing for your campsite. I mean, not necessarily typical of Metrovan campgrounds, but is this something that has been earmarked, either operated by Metrovan or maybe a private sector initiative? So sort of that's question number one. Yeah. We talked a little bit about indirect economic benefits in terms of maybe restaurants and other things happening in the Cove. And I understand that's sort of a, when you talk about that parks do drive economic growth, I think we can say that, yes, there will be economic growth indirectly in that way. I think my second question just relates back to, we have an interesting balance between infrastructure and economic development. Like, for example, when we do build these multimodal pathways that allows for biking, that does sort of bring in more economic activity to the island. And just knowing that this campground is going to have bike access, is Metrovan looking at all and understanding too, I did get the takeaway that operating the park is not a revenue generator. You're providing a service. You're just trying to so there's not a lot of profit there. Yeah. But I would imagine when you're looking at the capital cost, are you looking at, specific kind of infrastructure to be a benefit to the community of Bowen Island, yes, just in general? Interested in any comments about also infrastructure.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And our mandate isn't to generate revenue, but certainly in the nature of managing a park system, we make significant investment. And so in terms of the investment associated with infrastructure and land, there's the upfront investment of the acquisition of the land. And then there's the infrastructure investment to operated, but also constructed the infrastructure that's needed to access the park and in the park itself. And then there's the ongoing work to make that. So within the park, I mean, trails, boardwalks, picnic shelters, removing roads we don't need, you know, washrooms, all those things, that's infrastructure that will be needed in a really sensitive way, of course. Connecting to the park and outside the park, multi-use pathway is an important piece of infrastructure that likely won't ultimately be owned by us, but we need to work with Bowen Island Municipality to invest in and achieve that. And also in the Cove, the infrastructure to integrate the park in the community. And we've talked about the shuttle, that's infrastructure in a different way, but how do we welcome people to the park in the Cove in a complementary way and receive them into the community and the broader island? There's infrastructure associated with that. And I spoke about the Davies Orchard project. I think our initial investment is $1.6 million there. And what that will take is it'll transform that space and give us 5 new cabins, not new cabins, sorry, fixed up cabins that are fixed. So in terms of infrastructure benefiting like the park and the community, those are buildings that the community can book and access and use.
Well, yeah. But to your point, the Davies Orchard, it is a different kind of project because I do view that as being used by and a benefit for residents of Bowen Island, as opposed to the campground, which will most likely really not be used by residents of Bowen Island. So I guess just a clarifying question, do you see a commercial concession stand as part of the campground? Sort of question one. And B, in terms of those capital infrastructure investments, is Metrovan willing to look at financially contributing to those infrastructure investments, like a multimodal route to the campground?
Yeah, okay, thank you for clarifying that. First question was concession. We don't know is the answer yet. The camping, overnight camping, it's very rustic. So there might not be a business model there, but there might be a service model there in terms of, you know, it's the camp host also providing some basic amenities, or maybe there is. So we don't know yet, but it's on our radar. We're going to look at it. So maybe to that one. In terms of infrastructure investment, really important to note the campground, very small portion of the overall park. So the benefit to the residents that they will likely reap is that access to day use. So enjoying the park for, you know, walking the dog, having a picnic, having a gathering with the family, watching the sunset. Infrastructure investment associated with that will be significant. And we plan to make that investment. In terms of investment in the municipal greenway system, yes, we do expect to make an investment in that as well through the rezoning process. Hopefully, I got that right. Did I get them all? I hope I did. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of timing here. And I think that it's wonderful, Jeffrey, for you to be providing, answering all of our questions. I think we also, though, need to maybe wrap this up, because then we need to have a conversation about what our recommendation is going to be. So maybe we can just do another quick, Brian, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Vaughn. I guess I think we have to keep in mind the nature of the application before us. And, this is not a for-profit commercial enterprise rezoning. This is Metro Vancouver proposing purchase of land for passive park with some overnight camping to, fundamentally bring back very important land back into public ownership. When I read these 7 criteria that are set out in this policy document from 2013, I think that some of the criteria may not necessarily be applicable to the application before us. And I would also point out that I don't think the concession stand is any part of the rezoning application. So if we simply focus on what's before us, clearly the Planning Development Department, if they are instructed to draft a bylaw, could draft a very tailored and tightly knit bylaw to ensure that a concession stand is not a permitted use if in fact that's the will of council. But just getting back to these 7 criteria, we were hovering around criteria number 3 that says encourages local ownership, decision-making, and foster local economic linkages. When I read that, I read into that something like a Walmart wanting to come to Bowen Island, which is, governed, if you will, or dictated to by its corporate owners in the United States and has no connection whatsoever to the community. That's not the type of beast we're talking about here in terms of the analysis of these criteria vis-a-vis the Metro Vancouver Park application. So I think that we can say that certainly we've considered all 7 criteria, some of which may be more applicable than others, but I don't see where 3 is necessarily applicable to a park that's going to be run by Metro Vancouver, which the Bowen Island municipality is a part of. And I appreciated the comments that Jeffrey made in terms of the degree of cooperation between levels of government, local government, and the upper tier government in terms of decision-making in the future. We're not necessarily at odds because it's a commercial enterprise and there's some profit motive on the part of one of the parties. So I don't know if that's helpful, but as far as I'm concerned, criteria 3 is not necessarily applicable to the discussion before us.
Agreed. Thank you, Brian. No, I don't intend that we have to go through one to 7, and it was just a way to start the conversation, basically, right? Because you're right, it's not necessarily applicable. So, Levin, you have something quick to say?
Well, I have a question to Jeffrey also for our conversation. Is if I'm listening to the island, I think there's a very big alignment. But one of the best things that can happen is that the park becomes protected as a reserve, a nature reserve. The whole discussion is about the campground and the direct form of that. My question to you, Jeffrey, how much space is there, given the rezoning request that is in front of us with 100 campgrounds, very specific details? How necessary is that detail already now for you guys in order to say yes to a sale? Or can this be built up gradually, step by step with the island? Because we don't know whether this is the best possible solution for the long-term future. But that's now the one we have to decide upon. That creates a catch-22. And I think a lot of the hiccup and the fuss on the island is about that, not about the park. That's one of the biggest gifts we can see. That's what you hear in all of the narratives and the conversations. It's about the specifics of a camping ground. So how much space is there to let that go and let that grow? That's the question.
Yeah, thank you. I'll do my best to answer that. The camping requirement is, or I guess I should start with the rezoning application. The rezoning applications for up to 100 sites, and so that is to seek land use approval to provide that program. Everything else that is in a park, we can do in any zone on Bowen Island municipality. So there'd be no need for a rezoning process if it weren't for that. Now, the camping component of the project is important because of the unique location of the site, and that it's further afield from regional residents who are the broader region making the investment. And the nature of the site being one that was cleared and serviced with roads lends itself to providing that opportunity without major environmental impact, because there's roads, there's servicing, we can do it in existing cleared areas. So having said that, we're in the planning process now to figure out what it looks like on the land. So exactly how many, exactly where do they go, exactly what type, how they will be phased in over time. Those are all the things we're working on now. So hopefully that answers your question a bit.
Great, thanks, Jeffrey. Jody?
Two hopefully quick questions. One, I've heard fears that the park might be cut off from Bowen Islanders just being able to go in the park for free and walk the trails and stuff like that. At the moment, we don't get charged to go into Crippen. So I'm just want to clarify that that's not going to be an economic burden in that way on residents.
No, we don't charge admission in any of our park sites. And I think where that concern may have come from is the idea about capacity management. It's really important. And particularly around putting pressure on ferry and road systems. So what we have talked about is in the high season, be it a long weekend, be it sometime in the summer, that there would be a reservation system or there would be restriction on car access to the park. And really the intent of that is just to manage, to ensure we're integrating this system well to the community. Now, the detailed thinking there is important in terms of allowing local people to have that, half-hour hike, right? It's a different experience. So that day-to-day access is important. We've heard that. And the intent isn't to, restrict that sort of free-flowing access in any way. The reservation system is really about not putting pressure on infrastructure. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and then hopefully one other quick question. Because we've got the economic development focus here, and I'm just trying to understand what is the economic loss for Bowen Island. And I don't know at this time, and maybe others can clarify, is Metro Vancouver contributing to the water, to the infrastructure? The community's growing, the RCMP we're going to have to, once we go over 5,000, I don't know how all those things come in. So there's the capital cost of doing the park, but what about the ongoing costs, and how would that potentially negatively impact Bowen Island, or what is Metro factoring in to contribute to the sort of ongoing operational costs and infrastructure for the island?
I think I can speak to some of that. In terms of the tax revenue loss, I'll defer to Bowen Island municipal staff for that calculation. But in terms of the infrastructure costs, ultimately Metro Vancouver, as the landowner, is responsible for all of that infrastructure within the park. So the provision of safe and drinking water, the collection of waste and taking care of it, septic, sewage, all of that infrastructure within the park serving park visitors is Metro Vancouver's responsibility to invest in and maintain over time. That infrastructure, most of it actually is not connected to it's not municipal infrastructure. Now, there are municipal assets, as we call them, in the park right now, municipal roads, municipal trails, municipal boardwalks. If it is of interest to the municipality, those may be included in the park, and we would take on the investment in those going forward. I mean, that's a decision we would make collaboratively with Bowen Island municipality, but it's one that we've made with other municipalities. And given the experience with this group, I don't need to tell you that there's the upfront cost, and then there's the maintenance cost of assets, as we call them, and it's quite high. So that would be a benefit to the municipality. In terms of emergency services, the draw of our parks on emergency services is extremely low. It's just because our staff are trained to a high level, we're so risk adverse, we don't tend to generate a lot of emergency calls, a lot of emergency situations. And because of the training of our staff, in many ways we augment local fire response and other agencies. So we are in the process of just providing a bit of data on that to the municipality in terms of how many emergency calls and that kind of thing do we generate a year. So hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Let's see, Councillor Jurgensen.
Thank you. One question, I've been looking through the proposals, and I noticed that it's been referenced several times that the campgrounds are only a small portion of the park. Is there a reason why all 10 lots are included in the rezoning instead of, for example, 4 or 5 lots that would have the camping on it?
Yes, great question. Because we're at it gets back to that idea of land use planning now. So we know that they will take up a small portion of the park, and at a schematic level, we've located them on areas that were cleared for building sites. But as we go through the detailed planning process, it may turn out, well, hey, actually this site needs to, we don't want any camping on this. It's too close to the conservancy. So we're going to move it over a little bit this way as we get into the detailed piece of layout work.
Okay, and is there any reason that work isn't being done prior to the rezoning? So that only the bits that need to be rezoned, truly need to be rezoned for camping use are being affected?
I guess it's just a typical process we would follow, sort of land use first and then detailed design after, just to ensure that we actually have that municipal approval to do it. So confirm that we have the ability to provide that program and then do the detailed work of what it looks like on the ground.
Thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Cooper?
So this is a bit of maybe a question and a process question. So out of this discussion, we then recommend to council whether we support the rezoning or not, which then they go on to vote on. Is that how it works?
I'm actually struggling with that. I'm often typing in the background, making notes and trying to get a recommendation crafted.
Yeah.
And I am finding I'm running into sort of 3, either just general comments. I've also come into a request / conditions type of recommendation, or a support, not support statement. Okay. So I was hoping, I see the mayor's got his hand up. Yeah. I would need some guidance from the committee on how to frame this as well.
Just from my perspective, I'm a data guy, and given that there's 100 campsites provided, it seems like traffic is the primary concern from an economic perspective, whether it's going to be a drag on the community or a net benefit to the community, but we don't actually have traffic figures yet. And I just don't see how to make a recommendation when we don't have, estimated figures.
Cooper, our recommendation can be that there needs to be this, X information provided before, highly recommend that this information be provided before a decision is made, for instance, or something like that.
I didn't know.
But what I wanted, can I just say, I want to let Jeffrey go here very quickly. So, because I think that this is, to format this, we need to have a conversation just amongst the committee. So, Mayor, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, just on that process piece, and maybe I'll try and embody our planner and what our planner would say in this as well, is that where we are in the process yet is we haven't even had first reading. So the way that this rezoning would go is there would be a first reading, a second reading, a public hearing, a third reading, and then an adoption. So you can expect to see this come back again. And the other piece that's a little tricky is the alignment of the various processes. So what we're working on is aligning Bowen's rezoning process, as it plays out with Metro Vancouver's engagement and design process. So, and where Metro Vancouver is at is they've just completed their phase 1 of engagement, which is their listen and learn phase. And Jeff, if I'm talking out of turn here or getting anything wrong, feel free to jump in. And that'll lead into a phase 2 and then a phase 3. And the phase 2 and phase 3 get into some of those detailed design elements, more detailed site plans, what this actually looks like, educational programs in the park, and it'll drill down. So at this point, and this is exactly what Cooper is feeling, is where it's reasonable for the committee to go at this point isn't necessarily a yes or no, because frankly, there's not enough information to make that determination. It's going to be from the lens of community economic development, as you know, council compiles its first reading and then comes back to Metro and says, before we get to a second reading, before we get to a public hearing, here's what we need. And here's what we need to feel settled. So, you know, for you, Cooper, it'll be like, what information do I need? And do I think from the lens of economic development that this committee will need to make a decision to have a yes or no? So that when we get into those second and third readings, like by third reading, it should be pretty formalized. That'll be after the Islands Trust referral. That'll be after the public hearing. But right now it's just like, you know, really, because it feels early in the process, right? I mean, think of all the questions we just had. It was like a dam breaking, an outflow of questions to Metro Vancouver. There's probably a lot that's stirring for this committee to consolidate. What does it need for economic development? Some of the directions that I would encourage, the Community Economic Development Committee is probably the one that's most closely aligned to tourism on the island. So impacts on Snug Cove. I really like what I was hearing from Jeff around, you know, what are the impacts as if visitations increased for the portfolio of assets that Metro Vancouver has on the island, like Davies Orchard, like a potential Cape Roger Curtis, like Crippen, like Dorman, you know, what does that mean for the visitor experience, the tourist experience coming into the island and dispersing them from the cove, or having them pass through our businesses and interacting with our community at that level? What's the impact on you know, the other economic drivers in the area, whether it's transportation? The finance committee has you know, already wrestled with the loss of revenue as a result of taxes, but that's definitely an economic consideration. So at this point, it's like if we were to put some riverbanks in this and start to move in a direction, it's what do the members of this committee need in terms of information or you know, things that Metro Vancouver can provide that would lead them to feeling comfortable with a proposal like this. Does that make sense in framing the process?
That's really helpful for me.
Okay, great. Particularly because there's new members, there's people coming in. You know, there's a couple of different large, you know, bureaucratic weather patterns moving at the same time. I just wanted to kind of bring this into like, you know, what can we do tonight in 28 minutes?
So you're saying like specifically information?
Well, information, requests, asks, you know,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
it is. So it's like, if, you know, imagining, you know, the process is the process, and the information that we get back will take however long it takes to get back. But, you know, if this committee and its members were to, you know, to approve a project like this, or to recommend council really consider this, you know, what information do we need to have? What is it that we need to look at? What kind of data do we need to do? Is it, you know, is it a recommendation to, you know, give us money to complete the multi-use path? Is it, you know, nothing more than a transportation study? Is it, you know, a wider visitor management projection and framework? Is it, to Levin's point, like some kind of shared governance, and what does that look like? So all of these things can be included, and that'll get back up to council. We'll sift through it, bundle it up in our first reading, and then send it off to Metro Vancouver.
So I have a nice list for me in that regard.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Steph has been.
It feels a
Sorry,
little
can I-
aggressive though. That's all I wanted to say. Like some of these.
Steph, can I just interrupt? So I have one more hand up. It's Brian. Brian, do you have a question for Jeffrey? Or I think this type of discussion around our process, we just need to do and let Jeffrey go.
I have a
So-
suggestion for a motion to get the ball rolling. So
Okay, then I'm
don't
gonna
have any
just,
further
let's just hang on. Let's thank Jeffrey very much for coming and fielding our questions. Really appreciate it. And now we will struggle or work around our own process here and figure out what we're doing. And yeah, I just want to thank you again.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for the opportunity and appreciate the discussion, really thoughtful questions. So appreciate it, and hope you all have a great night.
Thanks,
You
Jeff.
too.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. I just don't think he had to sit too much
Yeah,
more of us
sorry.
figuring out what we're doing here.
Thanks.
And you know,
Brian?
I hope that there's also space for us to make some recommendations. Like, obviously, we're seeking more information, and obviously we'd be interested in having more information and moving forward. But I think there was enough there too that there's some recommendations we could make as well in terms of our comments from this meeting.
Absolutely.
Can I just ask procedurally that for Councillor Jurgensen's benefit, that if we, unless I've actually named you and asked you to, it's your turn to speak kind of thing, please, if you are just making a comment, please say who you are. Just so he has a reference for who is speaking, okay?
Thank you.
And Brian, you had wanted to share something.
Thanks, Vaughn. Yeah, so it's Brian Haley speaking, and I guess I have a draft motion to get the ball rolling, if it might help, and we can wordsmith and obviously add or delete to the items as we go. I guess I've tried to keep track of some of the comments or concerns that we had this evening, so I don't know if it's totally comprehensive, but if you'd like, I could start it off, and hopefully I'm in line with what Steph has started with in terms of drafting her motion as well.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
So Steph has a draft motion in the agenda. So it reads that the Community Economic Development Committee recommend the following regarding Metro Vancouver application for rezoning and official community plan amendment application, blah, blah, blah. I think in that lead-off paragraph, we have to say that we have considered the criteria set out by Council in 2013, being the 7 criteria with respect to applications to amend land use documents. So I think that what we should say is that
whereas the committee has considered the economic development policy number 13-003.
Exactly, and then put the name of that policy in brackets.
Mhm.
Then we can go on and essentially say that what we're recommending, and this goes to the mayor's comments as well as Cooper's comments, given that there's so much stuff outstanding, certainly I don't feel comfortable in making a recommendation that the application be adopted, even subject to a whole list of criteria. However, I am comfortable in terms of recommending to council that in their consideration of the application, that it be subject to the following matters. And then we can enumerate the various matters we have raised tonight that we have concerns with. So if you'd like to, we could sort of start off on that basis. So I would suggest that we add to Stephanie's beginning motion to essentially say that that what we're recommending is that council consider the application subject to, and then.
Okay, so where's that then? That the committee recommend that council consider the following?
Right, you have a semicolon, right?
Yeah, okay, so after the semicolon?
So after the semicolon,
Okay.
keep in mind, this is what this committee is recommending, is that council consider the application, capitalize application, subject to, colon, and we're not recommending that they adopt the bylaw. We're simply saying that council consider the application subject to the following. Now, keep in mind, we're just one committee that this has been referred to. We're the Community Economic Development Committee. There's an environmental committee, there's transportation committee, there's parks committee, all of those planning and advisory, they're all providing presumably comments or recommendations back based on their area of expertise, their terms of reference. So I guess what we have to consider here, how broad are some of our comments going to be? I would suggest we keep them narrow for now, but we could probably expand them if anybody had any concerns. I know that Alex had concerns with respect to, how does the zoning bylaw get drafted? And, just how much area are the tents or the campsites going to take up? I believe that Daniel in his February 13th report did make a suggestion within the text of that report that the zoning bylaw can be tailor-made or very narrowly drafted to specify very specifically on the land use map a zoning or variation number whereby the campsites would only be in these very specific locations. So I think that, certainly if council is inclined to, do this, adopt a bylaw, they can direct Daniel to draft a very tightly knit bylaw that restricts the area of those campsites within the broader regional park. But I'm not sure if we want to recommend that or if we're going to leave that to council to determine or planning advisory committee. Seems to me that we might be more concerned about things like, whether or not the multi-use trail is going to be worked on in conjunction with Metro Vancouver and whether or not they're going to make a contribution to its construction. I think that Jody's comments with respect to what infrastructure is going to be in the cove to help coordinate and, direct people over to the park. I think that's something we'd want to do from an economic development perspective. I think we might also want to deal with, local hiring. Now, I heard what Jeffrey had to say with respect to, it's a difficult issue, but from a practical perspective, often either full-time, part-time, seasonal jobs are in fact hired locally. I think that we probably would want to make a recommendation that we're looking for some form of appropriate commitment from Metro Vancouver that they will implement a local hiring protocol with respect to those jobs. That's part of the economic benefit that's coming to the community with respect to the park. So I think we can list these as matters that council might want to consider when they are in fact considering the actual zoning bylaw before them. So in terms of listing them off, I guess the first one I would suggest is that Metro Vancouver agreeing to implement an appropriate local hiring protocol with respect to full-time, part-time, and seasonal employment opportunities generated by the proposed regional park. And I don't know if that requires any wordsmithing.
Didn't Jeffrey say that that's not possible on technical grounds, even though it happens like that usually?
He says it's difficult, and that's why I put the word appropriate in. It may come down to a best efforts commitment on the part of Metro Vancouver, but I'd like them to tell us that at some point as to just how much of a commitment they can make. I know that there may be union issues, but I'd like to see something out of it so that we can say that some of the criteria under this seven criteria policy from municipal council has actually been achieved.
I think that anything, sorry, Roger. I just want to interject here quickly. It's Vaughn here. I do think that, I'm assuming that there still is a negotiation possible. There's time for negotiating different things. But there's really one thing that I really wanted to ask Mayor Leonard is timelining here. So it sounds like, so Daniel wasn't able to give any, ballpark dates on when he laid out the entire process, right? Mm-hmm. And what keeps coming to mind to me is I think what most people are coming up with is that more information is needed on various things. This traffic study, all of these things. It's really, we want more information before decisions are made. What's your understanding of the schedule in terms of Metrovan being able to basically confirm this, the deal, the sale of the purchase of the property. How much of our process is going to be done and before they actually firm up the sale? Like, what are they expecting in terms of go ahead from the municipality? And is or could this, at what point is it, or is it even possible that the sale's at risk? Like, I just don't understand that process. I thought
Right.
they wanted a hard and fast by May, kind of like, we have to know that we have this, the changes to the OCP and rezoning, right?
Yes, and so as far as we know, the closing date for that sale is in early May. And the message that's been communicated to Metro Vancouver from both our staff and myself sitting on the Metro Vancouver board is that rezoning is an independent municipal process, and there's a lot of moving parts in this one, both in information that we need to send to our committees and engagement that we need to have in our community. And then as this, as we work through this, there's going to be information that they need to give us. So the earliest, I would, at this point, we're looking at a first reading. So we'll probably have most of our committee referrals come back to us at the next council meeting on April 11th. We'll probably, draft a very draft first reading of a rezoning bylaw for the end of April. And in that, because what we can do in that, when we do that, we can take all of the information that we've got from committees and we can say, okay, we've done a first reading, but here's everything that we need before we go to a second reading and a public hearing. And that's just the process. So I don't have a timeline for what happens after that. And then Metro Vancouver's got their own sale date. So, presumably
that's really up to
that'll-
them then. That's really up to them. They have their date and they can extend it or they can do whatever. But but we've been clear that by
Our-
first week of May, we're not going to have an indication of whether.
No, that would be, there's not enough there. That would be just an absolute breach of process to try and get 3 readings and an adoption by the start of May. So we've heard loud and clear from the community. We know that there's a plurality of opinions. There's polarization around this, and even tonight. So even if we kind of get a bit meta about it and think about what we've seen tonight, this is, what I see around this table is really, a bunch of engaged Bowen Island committee members being able to ask questions for the first time and getting answers back that feel very preliminary. So,
Well, that's on the other hand, I don't know how many committee members have attended their sessions, but they've had numbers of sessions where you could ask these very questions, right? With varying members of their staff available to address different issues. So
yes,
not the first opportunity we've had. Yeah.
No, and that's been their process with their engagement process and however that unfolds. What we're doing here is feeding into ultimately a council decision and what a rezoning will look like, what conditions will look like, what the municipal tools we have will look like, and some of the details from there. So really at this point, this is it's hard to know what to ask for. So I would just say, make your Christmas list and let's put it in there. Steph?
I'm so sorry. I have to interrupt. I feel like a hypocrite because I was saying we could take some time. I've got a hard stop at 7. We've got the Bowen Bay Water System Committee meeting at that time. I'd like to suggest that while a recommendation would be the best process for Daniel to include in his staff report, I can put together some notes and he can include high-level notes that you guys agree on, perhaps via email. If we'd like to do the other any other topics on this meeting. I need to be out of here by 6:57.
Yikes. Okay, I'm really sorry, Martin. Your presentation was scheduled for this meeting.
Oh, it's no problem. We can delay that.
I'm sorry about that. We've done that before. Because we're not going to have time to give that proper attention, obviously. So
Sat has his hand up.
yeah, I'm just, in terms of what you're suggesting, Steph, I think there's a number of things that have come out, stood out, you know, that people have expressed. Is there a way we can all sort of, you know, just bullet point sort of the items that we want to include in the recommendation and send them to you, and you can, I know this is
Sure.
more work, but I'm not
That's fine,
sure
and-
how else to do it, because I think we
That's
all
fine,
need
and
to
I
be
have
able to
notes.
say, you know, Cooper's comments, et cetera, right? So,
Yeah.
and let's take the last few minutes then just to acknowledge there were some more comments, I think, Seth.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. It's Sachi Pander speaking. So I just wanted to provide some context to the committee. I know there's several new members, and of course, there's a few people on that committee that have been through this proposal or rezoning process several times. But you know, I went through a rezoning. I was a proponent on the other side not too long ago, and then I also work in the resource industry and looking for approvals pretty regularly. And I will say that, you know, I think the general feeling of the community and the committee as well is that, you know, Metro Vancouver doesn't seem to have enough information or detail. And I would say that certainly as a proponent going through this process before, the expectation was that I had my ducks in a row. I knew exactly what I was doing, and that is what I was proposing, not, oh, we don't know, we'll figure that out later. And then now when I put on my sort of, you know, resource proponent hat, the similar thing, modern day, if you will, or up to date proposals of any type require you to lock in whatever you're doing. And yeah, you might not like that. And yeah, you might want to change things later, but it is the expectation that the community or communities that you're proposing a project to have a very clear understanding of what it is that you're doing, and you have a detailed enough plan to be able to communicate that to them. And that's not an unrealistic expectation. So that's, again, sorry, just providing a bit of a perspective to the committee about that. I do like Brian Haley's proposal, if you will, of putting together some points and sharing that, and I think that's probably the best path forward for the community or for the committee. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Seth. Did anybody, I thought I saw another hand, no? No, okay. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. I always thought, I don't know why you wouldn't have a complete park design available as a, you know.
Well, sorry, it's Kirsten that's just jumping in here. What I do understand is that they're going back and forth between community consultation, gathering information, and it's an iterative process to come up with the final plan. So ultimately they will have the final plan, but the impression I have from Metro Vancouver is that there's an engagement process that they're following along while refining the plan. So we will see it, and we'll see that before a final decision is made. But they're kind of taking an incremental approach.
I dropped most of this in my comment there, but we have to have the traffic figures, and it's not about necessarily like vehicular traffic. Like, I understand if you live on White Sails, it's that for sure, but it's literally how many people are coming to Bowen with wallets seems like a very important thing for an economic development committee to understand. And I do think the other point I made in my comment, like, if the ferry's overloaded all the time, that is an economic issue because it will impact people's ability to live on Bowen and commute easily. That will impact property values. That will impact, like, that is the key thing that drives the economy of Bowen. So we have to have that. That seems like the fundamental input to the entire process.
I would agree with that, Cooper. And also, it's Vaughn here. I was thinking, you know, we have that issue already. It's not new. we already have transportation issues. We have ferry issues. It's been getting worse as BC ferries, not only with capacity, but as BC ferries has struggled with keeping their employees basically, or hiring enough employees. So I don't know. I kind of wanted to put this. My thing was too is we already have that issue. Yes, it will be increased by how much? I don't know. I really don't know. I think campers, want the nature experience. They're not going to stop at the grocery store. They're going to pack up a bag of food and camp. What you do is you make your own stuff, right? You roast marshmallows, whatever. Anyways, my point being, how can we look at some of those things and in this process negotiate for the betterment of the island? There's going to be some incentive on Metrovans part to get a yes from this community. So maybe some of the unintended consequences can be actually benefits for the community for issues we already have and we don't have solutions for. And I agree, transportation is probably the number one, really. And I also just want to keep number 6 on our list, on our criteria list says, does the proposal enhance the island's environment, health, and well-being? And to me, that's what community economic development is. It's sort of the cornerstone. It's not just businesses, it's not just revenue. It's the overall health and well-being and the ability for this community to thrive. So I think when we're thinking about what items we want to include, it's okay. It doesn't have to be directly related to, a concession stand, for instance, opportunity or this or that, because the larger impact of everything we do here is about this community thriving. So I just want to sort of put that as another, thought for as we're each compiling our list.
Okay, so thank you. And I think this has been a great.
You have to go, Steph.
Sharing. Well, the Zoom's going to kick us out. It's a terrible process where it doesn't wait.
So Steph, are you going to send out an email with the beginning of the resolution and everybody fill in their thing and fire it back to you? Or is that what we decided?
I'll put some notes together. I don't know that a recommendation is really can you let me think?
Yeah.
But definitely without that email, you guys just send me your stuff, SSHORTT,
Okay.
who I am. Send me your priority bits, and apologies for this has been a wild and woolly meeting, but I think some great communication took place.
Okay. I guess we're adjourning the meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Enjoy the sunshine.
Enjoy your evening.
Thanks, everybody.